Hey there, this is John from Excel Tricks for Sports. Today I'm going to be doing a demo which is a very common question I get. Now the Athlete Fitness Workshop, which is a little file that I sell, which is a way to write your training programs, that kind of layout isn't for everyone. Some people like to be able to choose a set rep scheme or concept that they like, and that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many weeks of workouts all populate, and the sets and reps and loads and so on that you use across those 4 or 5 weeks will automatically appear. So we're going to have a go at that today. The first thing we have to do is go to our control panel page, and I've done some work here, but we are going to name all these ranges. So I've put some names and some 1RMs and some exercises and a few set rep schemes in place so that we can do our example, but I haven't done any of the naming yet, so a refresher on that. I'm going to select those 3 names there, and in the name manager box I'm going to type athlete names. So the first two, you might wonder why I'm naming this twice. And the reason for that is these 2 cells will be available on a drop-down box, whereas this table will be available for the formula calculations. Primary lifts, notice that there is no space between secondary. It would be great if I spelt it correctly. Secondary and lifts, that's because you cannot have a space in between words in a named range. If you did want to have a space, you needed to use an underscore. I think that's everything. We can come back if we've forgotten something, but I click on this drop down box, I can see 6 named ranges that we've just created in about a minute or so, so that's pretty easy going. Start with the easiest one first and we'll work our way through to some of the harder ones. Click on the data menu, data validation, choose list. Once you click inside the source box, you can type F3 and all our lists appear. You don't have to type it manually. Why don't we use an extra little feature of data validation? I don't use this very often, but sometimes I do if it's for a client or a colleague who might need some cues. Alright, next one we're going to do is column A, exercise category. We'll work our way across. The exercise category, we didn't actually create a named range to populate this drop-down box, but we've only got 2. We've got primary lifts and secondary lifts, so we can do our data validation without having a list. Do it the same way, but I just type the words. So I don't have an equal sign at the beginning. That's what you'd do if you were selecting a named range, but I just type the different options that I want to appear and we're done. So that's all working fine. Alright, let's work our way across. Actually, I'll jump across to column C because that keeps the connection tight. So when I choose primary lifts from column A, I want to only be able to choose lifts from that primary group in column C. So if I select that whole column, we can do it all at the same time. Data validation list equals indirect A7. Now I need to take away the $ from the 7 because we want the relationship just to be across one row. So if you choose primary lifts in cell A8, then in cell C8 you can choose from that list. If the $ was in place, all of the cells would be linked to only the selection made in A7, which you don't want that. So that seems okay. Indirect A7. So the indirect function, what it does is it converts whatever's in cell A7 here into the named range that will appear in cell C7. Now this function only works if what's typed here in A7 equals exactly a named range. So quite often people will do this, leave a space in between primary and lifts here, and then try and do the indirect function. Let's try and do it. We'll see what happens. And so we get this error message. The reason is there ain't no named range called primary space lifts, so it evaluates to an error and it won't let you do anything with that. And so that can be a bit confusing, and it's a pretty simple little thing to get wrong, and I've seen lots of people spend a lot of time figuring that out. So I'm just going to choose some exercises. This looks like my kind of workout. Alright, so let's do column B because we missed that one out. Set rep system, same method as before, data validation, choose list, in the source box type F3, and we need to choose set rep schemes. Now I just completely made up some nonsense here for the name of a set rep scheme. 4 times descending 8-1, so like I say, made it up, 4 sets starting from 8, descending by 1 rep per set and 1 rep per week. So that was the logic that I used. I don't think I've ever used such a scheme, but that doesn't mean it's not worth using as an example. And I'll choose the other option here. So basically my principle will be that if it's a primary lift, we will reference the 1RM for that exercise and use that to prescribe the loads. Just noticed an extra column here, so I'm just going to delete that. So first thing we want to do is a real simple VLOOKUP that hinges off 2 things. It's actually going to be an index function, sorry, not a VLOOKUP, but Chris and Bench need to determine the 1RM. So if we go back to the control panel page, we see here that Chris and Bench, so we need to find 95. So we're going to write a function. We could use a VLOOKUP. I prefer index, so let's go ahead and do that. And remembering we're going to use the RM lookup table. So if I've forgotten again, I can type F3 in this formula box as well, and it appears. So the F3 button, very handy when you're starting to write formulas. And so I need to write a row number and a column number. I'm just going to type it and then we'll replicate it in a second. If I'm not mistaken, it was row 3, column 2. Now that's no good to me. I need it to be dynamic and I need it to be able to figure out the athlete excuse me, and the exercise. automatically. So what I'm going to do is, instead of 3 here, I'm going to do a function where we match Chris's name and see whereabouts in this group of cells it is, because that'll tell us the row number of the table. All the way through here, I'm just using the F4 key to lock down our cells. And so what I just typed there was a match function, and it should give us the row number of 3. So I'm going to select that whole little bit, including the brackets at the end. Now I'm going to type F9 and see what it tells us. Great, so that tells us 3. Control Z takes it back again. So we've got the first part of that sorted, and I'm just going to check it by putting Jake. And Jake had 120. Great, so first part of that match function is working. Need to get the second part working now. So we need to do a similar thing. Match again. This time we're matching this exercise, and I want to lock the C part. I want to match the exercise that is bench in this column. Now you notice I'm selecting this blank cell C4 in both cases. That's because that's actually taking up a row in the column of our table, so we need to include it, otherwise we'll always be one short. And now if I close that off, we should remain 120. Great. And if we change it back to Chris, we get 95. Now, there's only going to be RMs for our primary lifts, so if I drag that down, I'm going to get a couple of errors there. And now there's 2 ways that I could sort that out. The rough way would be like this. And that just gets rid of that. If error with a blank at the end is excellent. My example is a really simple one, so that method works quite nicely. But if you've got a more complicated system, you might need a more complex solution. Why don't I show you that as well? I don't want to drag out this tutorial too long, but I use this particular method extensively. So it's an if equation. Is number, sorry, it is quite big, it's already got 3 layers, if, is number, and match, but I'll explain it once I've finished it. So I just started typing primary lifts. And I was able to auto-complete by hitting the tab button. Alright, I'll drag this down and then I'll explain the formula. So, whenever you do the match function, what it does is it gives you a number if it's successful. If it can match your word in the list, it gives you a number, and that number tells you it's the 4th item in the list, it's the 2nd item in the list, and so on. So if I hit F9, we'll get a number here, number 1. If I don't get a number, it tells us that it's not on the list. And so there's my answer basically. When you do an if equation, you want a true or a false. oops, excuse me, I didn't select that last bracket. Hit F9 and it says true. So this is true because bench is in my list of primary exercises and therefore there is an RM attached to it. If I go down to step ups, I'll go match, F9, comes up with an error. Why? Because it's not in the list. And so if I include the is number part and evaluate that, F9 key again, it says false. And so false means it goes straight down to the end of the line where the answer is double quotes. So it is a little bit of an elaborate way to do it, but it can be quite useful when you want to have all sorts of complicated lists and things going on, some of which have different methods to another. So you might have primary lifts, secondary lifts, auxiliary lifts, whatever, and the primary lifts have RMs attached to it, whereas the secondary lifts have a percentage attached to them, and the auxiliary lifts have nothing attached to them. So you need more than one option sometimes. Alright, so enough about that, let's get on with things. So we now want to be able to fill in weeks 1, 2 and 3. Now back here we've got our table and it's called set rep details, and so for week 1 we've got 4 categories and they are in columns 2, 3, 4 and 5. So it's actually reasonably easy. We pretty much just have to do this. The only one that's complicated is 4 is load, so let's just do the easy bit first. Equals index. What's our array? I've forgotten, so I'm going to use F3. Set rep details. What row number of the table? Well, we want to match the system that we've chosen here, which you'll find in B7. Then we want to match it. We want to match it in a list that we've created. Hit F3, set rep schemes, and do an exact match. So that'll tell us the row number. It'll be row number 1. What column number do we want? Well, we're going to do it the easy way here. We're just going to type it in. So we've got 4 sets, and I'm going to drag across reps and just manually change that to 3 and 4. If I copy this down, we'll get some error signs, but we know how to deal with them, so we won't worry for now. But it's just pulled them across, and so if I change this set rep scheme to something else, everything changes okay. So let's go back to the table and we'll find out that week 2 is in F, G and H, which is columns 6, 7 and 8. So I literally just have to copy this formula, put it here, drag it across and change that column number to 6, 7 and 8. Let's do it again. I'm guessing it is 10, 11 and 12. Alright, so things are already looking quite nice. So what we can do is start working on probably the hardest part of this process, and that is putting in the load lifted, because this formula will get a little bit messy. So the formula will pretty much look like this. Whatever the RM load is, and we've put that in column D, times a percentage. We've got it recorded as a decimal in our table, something like that. So there we are here, and that's in column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So 5, 9, and 13. So it's not too bad. Why don't we just start by getting the first part of the problem in there. Clicking that down, drag, change that to 9, drag that across, change it to 13. So things are coming along pretty well. We just have to multiply this by our RM. Oops. Clumsy on the drag. I've just got a new mouse and I'm getting used to it. Last one. There's a couple of little tricks I want to show you. We'll do that in just a second. Alright, so we've got our table looking there. Aside from those errors, which we know how to get rid of, and we can do that later, we are looking alright. The blank columns obviously are for actual load, so the athlete might record the load that they lifted for the best set or something like that. But you know, anyhow, a table in there with a space to do so. Now, what we want to be able to do is make it so that the loads prescribed actually makes some sense. This is load in kilograms. That's the side of the world that I'm on, Southern Hemisphere, and we want to round those loads up to the nearest 2.5 kilogram, for example. So now, and it's a little bit hairy, this video's been going a bit too long, so I won't dwell on this one, because I could dwell on it for a while and try and explain things more carefully, but I'm just going to rattle through it. Function is called round, because we want to round the number up or down. Just want to wrap this number that we've got that currently evaluates as 71.25, and I'm going to divide it by 2.5. That's what we want to round it to, the nearest 2.5. And I want 0 decimal places. I'm going to times it by 2.5 at the end. Like I said, apologise, I warned you in advance, it was a little bit complex, but what it's now done is it's rounded things nicely. So if I just undo for a second, we can see that 75.6 went down to 75, and that 112.5 stayed where it was because it's already a nice round number. And so I could copy that formula down to the other ones to finish things off, but I'm sure that's not necessary. In this particular case, I think if there is a perfectly good solution to tidy some of these things up, I'll do a couple, I won't do them all. So anyhow, what we've got is something that fills out 3 weeks with reps and sets based upon some predefined methodology that you have. Now, people that I've assisted to build these things have sometimes had hundreds of different types of set rep schemes, some of them going out 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. But as long as you have a nice organised set of lookup tables, it's okay. Now, we still might want to use this set rep scheme for the step-ups, but often people have the most emphasis around their primary lifts where they've got RM loads and oftentimes tracking the loads lifted. So there's a bit more importance placed upon that kind of stuff. So without tidying up some of these errors, I'm going to stop. If you want a copy of the spreadsheet, feel free to email me, athletefitness@gmail.com. I'll happily send it to you, but hopefully this has given you some ideas and you can start going and building your own stuff. See you next time.